Good afternoon to you, Mrs. Phillips. And thank you for taking the time to come and share with the Public Accounts Committee today. I see that you are accompanied.
Good afternoon, sir.
Royally so. By Permanent Secretary, Prime Minister's Office, right? And your husband?
Yes, please.
Whom we acknowledge as well. We will try not to keep you any longer than is absolutely necessary. We've already detained you for over an hour, hour and a half, right? But you are meeting today with members of the Public Accounts Committee. On my right, your left, Minister Cummins. My left, your right, Minister Husbands. The members of the committee who are online who help us to constitute the required quorum: Senators Drake, Senator Nurse, and Senator Moe. Also, staff from the Office of the Auditor General and the Auditor General himself. You are required to make an affirmation or to take an oath, and the option is yours.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Phillips. Could you please stand, please? Your option is to take the oath or to be affirmed, ma'am. Take the oath. Raise the Bible in your right hand and read the oath of witness before you.
The evidence that I shall give before the committee shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God.
Thank you so much. You may sit.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to ask you that for the record, you just read your name and position now held with the public service, and position held with the public service, let's say between 2015, 2019.
My name is Janet Phillips. I'm currently assigned to the Ministry of Health and Wellness as the Permanent Secretary. Between October 2015 and May 2018, I was assigned to the Ministry of Social Care, Constituency Empowerment, and Community Development as Permanent Secretary.
Thank you very much. Members will have some questions for you in relation to your service with the Ministry of Social Care, particularly in relation to those areas. And as those questions have a bearing on the Auditor General's report of 2020. Anybody wants to start? You always defer to me. They come with the easier questions first, Mrs. Phillips. Now, we were advised by Permanent Secretary Gabriel Springer. That's correct, right? Also, it was referenced in the report of the Auditor General that, in fact, the audit was requested by Ms. Springer, who had some serious concerns as to the operations of the Poverty Eradication Fund when she arrived there, and therefore in relation to the tenure of her predecessor. That would have been you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Did you yourself have any concerns as to the operations, the way the fund was being operated?
At the time when I was there, sir?
At the time when you was there, Ms. Springer suggested she was so concerned with what she found, lack of proper documentation as to matters, systems not in place, procedures not necessarily followed, and her concern led her to actually inviting the Auditor General to do an audit. Would you have been concerned yourself about any of these matters when you left?
Sir, I would say that if I could go back a little before, when I came to office in late October 2015, the first thing I did was that I met...
Could you draw the mic, Marshall, could you draw
Sorry?
the mic a little closer for her, because she is wearing the mask.
Sorry, sir. Okay.
Could you start again, because they're being documented.
When I came to office, you can hear me now, sir?
Yes, thanks.
When I came to office in late 2015, the first thing that I did was I met with the different heads of departments so that I could get a feel for how the ministry's programs were run and being organized. And one of the programs would have been this same program, the Poverty Eradication Fund. So I would have met with the field investigator, as well as the project coordinator at that time. And they would have taken me through the guidelines in respect of how the fund was managed and how the cases were assessed. And therefore, on that basis, I moved forward. I didn't have the concerns that have been expressed by the permanent secretary at that time. I didn't have those concerns, sir.
So when you left off, there were properly functioning systems.
Sir, I would say that many attempts have been made to put systems in place and that we had made a lot of headway in that regard.
So you were not concerned when you left there that reporting lines were blurred or not observed, accountability was not observed? You were not concerned about any of that?
Sir, this is how I will respond. I knew the areas for which I had responsibility, and I knew the reporting relationships and the lines up to me. And everything that we did in respect of the fund came through me, so I can account for what I did, sir.
Okay. And you would not have been able, at the time of your leaving, to have identified any reason why there should be the necessity for an urgent audit?
Not at that time, sir.
No, okay. Now, you did some disbursing of funds to Urban Rural Commission.
No, sir.
The fund didn't do that?
No, oh, you said when you meant you as in the
No,
ministry?
I mean the fund.
Yes, sir, the fund did that.
Are you in a position to do those kinds of disbursements?
Sir, when I came, I found that we did.
That's the tongue in cheek. You gotta be a little facetious. You said you thought I would address the question to you personally. So I would not have imagined that you were in the financial position to make those kind of disbursements. Though. If you want to tell us that you were, go right ahead.
Sorry, sir.
No. So urban and rural would have benefited from disbursements from the eradication fund.
Yes, sir.
Were you happy with the way that setup operated?
When I came to the ministry, that had already been done. I did hear that there had been concerns. Well, it was mentioned on about 2 occasions that there were concerns because funds had been dispersed, but that no housing had been completed. I never actually saw any reports or any files relating to the matter. It was not a matter that was discussed much in the ministry. Just I would have heard it in one passing comment, sir.
But ultimately, would you have been responsible? As the PS in the ministry, ultimately, would you have been responsible?
It didn't happen in my tenure, sir.
Did it?
No, sir. I was there from 2015, October 2015, and I left May 31st, 2018.
So
this didn't happen in my tenure, sir.
So it is prior then to 2015.
Yes, sir.
And no funds then were disbursed during your period of being PS there to the urban or rural?
Sir, there was a case where there was a fire victim that was being dealt with by the Urban Commission. And because it was a welfare case, they asked the ministry, they didn't have all the funds, if we would assist in the completion of the house. I think the cost of the house was $80,000+, and an assessment was done, and it was agreed that we would help, and so we paid half of the money. I think it was over $40,000, so I think that was actually disbursed either during my tenure or a little after I left. And that was the only occasion that we would have had, I as permanent secretary would have had any relationship with the matter, because it came up as a case for us, and we reviewed it, and we agreed because it was an urgent matter, we didn't want the fire victims suffering any longer, and we chose as a ministry to give assistance to the tune of over $40,000+.
Let me be sure I understand. So a poverty eradication fund allocated funding to urban and rural from time to time.
Not under my tenure, sir, except for this one occasion, as is articulated in the report, so it would have fallen under when I was there. And so for that particular occasion, that $41,000 was dispersed to help with the case.
So between 2015 and 2018, no funds went from poverty eradication to urban or rural?
Not as only on this one occasion, sir. For no other occasion, sir, and that is documented in the report.
You then therefore can't tell us what was it that P.S. Springer would have put a halt to when she came in 2018, when she succeeded you?
Sir, I cannot tell you that.
Our understanding is, at least my understanding, other members can clarify if I'm wrong. My understanding was that this fund has been in abeyance since the arrival of P.S. Springer as P.S. in that ministry, but was in operation prior to that.
But not during my tenure, sir.
Sorry?
You say the fund was in abeyance, yes. As I say to you, her reasons for calling the audit, those were her reasons. As a permanent secretary, we have different perspectives on some things.
No, I'm just trying to get an understanding. My understanding up until you spoke just now was that the fund was in operation. It went into abeyance on instructions from P.S. Springer
Yes, sir.
when she arrived there.
Well, sir, I cannot speak to it going into abeyance when she arrived. I don't know at what particular time it went into abeyance, but when I left, it was still operational, sir.
Also, when you left, it was still operating.
Yes, sir.
So during your tenure, 2015, 2018, monies were transferred to rural and urban?
No, sir. I said no, sir.
All right, Minister Husbands, go ahead. Maybe
sorry,
you
just
get
to
clarified for me as you go ahead.
Yes, just to clarify, from the report, most of those disbursements to urban and rural took place between 2007 and 2013. Between 2013 and 2017, nothing was dispersed. And between 2017 and 2018, one disbursement was made, 41,000.
Which
So
is
that's
what PS
which
is
would
talking
be the
about. And
one
you
she
are
spoke
referring to page what?
That is on page
62, Chair.
70.
Page 62?
Page 62 of the report, sir.
Okay.
That is above, is in the
Yes.
table.
Yeah, I see it.
4.44.
In the table.
That's what she was trying to explain.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's only one.
So it's not really a fund going into abeyance on arrival of P.S. Springer?
Sir, I can't answer that.
Because I'm not asking you to answer, I'm just saying, it's not a question of fund going into abeyance on P.S. Springer instructions. It has not been in operation prior to her coming, really, except for this one instance. You aware of any issues with contracts entered into by rural or urban with funding given by the Poverty Eradication Fund, but those contracts not properly documented? Can you speak to any of those issues?
No, sir, I cannot.
All right. Yeah, Minister Husbands.
Hi, good afternoon.
After, ma'am.
My main concern is with the process of approvals. We were told by some of the other officers that worked with the department how the process worked, that things came in, a field investigator did an interview, does an assessment, raises an assessment, is reviewed by the coordinator, and then it goes up for approval.
Yes.
During your time, what did the approval process look like when it left the coordinator? What happened to an application all the way through to a disbursement? What was practiced?
Sorry, ma'am. When the approval, as you said, the field investigator would do her assessment, reviewed by the coordinator. It would then come up to me, coordinator, and I would sit down and have a discussion based on the recommendations. On some occasions, I would sign off, and then it will go back down to the coordinator, who would then liaise with the accounts department to get the payments done on the relevant files. On other occasions, I sent it up to Minister and he would do the final approval, and it would come back to me, go back to coordinator, and who would then take it to accounts. And sometimes it all depended on how quickly funds were needed to be dispersed. 'Cause either I or him would sign off on the things, but he always got a copy of the approval process. There was a booklet that was always done. One copy went to PS, one went to minister, and the third copy was kept on file.
So in looking at, so my understanding is that the coordinator would bring them, y'all would discuss them. Would there be a situation where you had to query the assessment, or you had concerns about a particular assessment and it had to be redone? Was that part of what occurred?
There were occasions when I queried the recommendations, but we would then have a fuller discussion. Sometimes if we had to go back to the field investigator to get
More
more
information?
clarification. But we more often than less, we would resolve the matters in that meeting,
Mhm.
and I would either sign off, or sometimes I would send to minister, either one of us would do it. When it came back from him, then I would send it off to coordinator, who would then do the liaison with the accounts department to get the payments that had been recommended by either myself or minister effective, so that they would go off to the relevant agencies for whom we were paying.
So well, I have two questions coming from your response. So it goes back to the coordinator, who then passes it to the accountant?
Yes, please.
Okay. And that was so throughout your time?
Yes, it was, ma'am.
And you said that there were some that you would approve on your own with the coordinator, and then there were some that you felt should go to minister. What would cause you to refer some to minister?
I can't remember distinctly, madam, why that happened, except that because I was aware that either of us could approve, I just all of the time, it would not have signed off on all. Sometimes I would send them to him because either of us could do the approval. So it wasn't that specifically there were cases that we considered to be peculiar or anything like that. It's just so that he was also part of the process on some occasions. Other occasions, if he was not there, or if it was something that one or two of the persons had been called in a lot and it was urgent, then I would do the final sign off and send back.
So if you had to determine that out of, say, 100 assessments, what percentage was likely to go up to the minister versus what you would do? I'm trying to get a sense of what caused the flow. Why you didn't do all, or why all did not go to the minister. I'm just trying to get a sense of what caused the difference.
Sometimes it had to do with timing, ma'am, and if he was available to do it. So if he was in office or something like that, it would go up to him. But if there were other urgent matters sometimes and he was not in office, then I would do the approval, but he got a copy of everything that would have been approved by me. The books were the same and everything.
Okay, so would it be fair to say then that for you, approval was something that the minister would do, but only if he was not present and it was urgent, you would do it without his prior approval, but you would give him a copy so that he could follow what was happening? Is that fair?
No, it isn't.
Okay.
It isn't. I think that when I look back at it, I might have done most of them.
Okay.
I think I might have done
You
most
did
of them.
most of them?
Yes.
Right. So can you think back to what would trigger you to say, I think I'll send these to minister?
I guess sometimes, ma'am, is that I didn't want him to be left out of the process, because there was a process that I came up from, and it was like respect to the office of minister.
Oh, you were humoring him.
I didn't say that, ma'am. Respect for the office of minister.
Okay. Were there times when, sorry, the other question would be, if, for example, there was an application that you felt did not deserve it, would that at any time go to the minister, or he only received what you felt was approvable, was appropriate?
If there were any times that I did not feel the application met the strict standard, I would put in the column, no, not recommended.
Not right. And what would
And-
happen to it?
And the occasions that they went to him, I've seen that as well, and signed off on it. So there was an issue where there were like contention between us about my not approving something that I said not recommended.
Okay. Were there any times when he may have overturned a recommendation for not approving something, that he would reverse it?
Not as far as I can recollect, ma'am.
Okay. Now, the record here says that there were 32 applications that were issued but did not have your signature, or, well, I shouldn't say that because we don't really know how many of the 32 were in your time. But there were 32 that did not have the signature of the PS and did not have the signature of the minister. How would something like that have occurred?
Ma'am, I when I saw in the report, it shocked me. I don't have an answer for that, ma'am, because the process was either approval at my level or the minister's level, and there was no room, as far as I'm concerned, for any other level of approval.
So you cannot account for why the accounting person would have issued that money without your signature or the minister's signature.
No, I cannot.
And based on the process that you outlined, would it be that the person at the coordinator level would have had to take it to the accountant, or was there another method by which an application would get to the accountant to be signed off that did not pass through you and your minister?
I don't know how to answer that, ma'am. I can just tell you what the process was as far as I'm aware. I've never heard, it's only when I read the report that I saw about these abnormalities or anomalies to a system that I thought was working the way it was designed to work, with the level of approval being given at the level of the permanent secretary or the minister.
Okay. Now, was there a process by which you as permanent secretary did a check off against what the accounting officer signed? In other words, you sent through 15. Was there a part of your process that allowed you to review how many the accounting officer had done?
The coordinator kept track of those things.
Okay.
She kept track of those things.
And was it ever reported to you that some of those things were awry, out of place,
No, please.
not to your knowledge?
No, please.
Okay. We also were told that 122 applications did not have assessments. There were 32 that did not have a minister's signature or a PS's signature. But there were also 122 that did not have an assessment. And it is supposed that the monies were forwarded. Did anything like that in the reporting ever come to you? It might not have been 122 because it might have been spread over a period. But anything like that occurred during your time where there was no assessment paper attached to the application and the monies were issued?
Not that I'm aware, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good to see you, PS. I just have a couple of questions. The Auditor General's report spoke about the absence of clearly defined criteria. What would be your assessment of the criteria being used to approve applications?
Okay. Just give me a moment, please.
Sure.
When I came to the ministry, there were guidelines that were being used to determine how cases were to be assessed. There was the per annum, the per capita income of the family, which at the time when the fund started up was $5,503. But during the country assessment for living conditions study in 2010, then that was revised to $7,861 per annum. Assistance was supposed to be only done on a one-off basis. And it was written into the guidelines that we were not supposed to be dealing with persons who had accumulated debt at commercial banks, business houses, or payment of debt for non-essential utilities. But it was always stressed in the guidelines that the provision of shelter shall be treated as a special case. And therefore, those guidelines were used, along with the fact that you could not make a verbal request for help. You had to actually submit a written request, which had to be then followed up by an assessment. And all the funds that were used that were approved had to be paid directly to the agency for which there was an outstanding debt. That is the guidelines and the criteria that was used when cases were being assessed.
So thank you for that. Is there a reason why you could think the Auditor General would have written in his report that there were not clearly defined criteria? Because what you just described there to me sounds like as if it's clearly defined.
I don't know, ma'am. I do not know.
All right, my follow-on question then is, on the basis of what you have just described, there was a section in the Auditor General's report which talks about questionable disbursements from the fund. One of those disbursements spoke to mortgage arrears, but you have just outlined, and Mrs. Hamlin, who spoke before you, about shelter being treated as a special case.
Yes.
Would you be familiar with the circumstances under which a marriage seminar and sponsorship of shows would have been benefiting from disbursements under the fund? Would you be in a position to advise what the criteria first would have been for those types of disbursements?
I am not aware of the circumstances under which my seminar was approved, but I know that there was a show under my tenure that was approved based on the recommendations and the assessments done by the persons who would have made the recommendations to me. And the thrust of that particular show was that it was for underprivileged mothers who came from dysfunctional families. And on one day in a year, an organization that is an NGO for which support can be given would present a list of the mothers who they thought were deserving based on the circumstances. They would be treated to a nice Mother's Day lunch, which a lot of underprivileged people probably can't go to restaurants to enjoy. And then based on how they lived in the community and interacted, one or two of them would have received trophies in their honor. And then they actually got to see a show based on the whole ethos of the fund and the fact that we were the Ministry of Social Care and stuff like that. When the case came up to me, I could not say no because I thought it was a good effort based on what it was about. It was not about a show and people getting dressed up and going to have a shamdong bandong party. It was about these persons who were underprivileged getting an opportunity to have a nice Mother's Day lunch, which we know could run a good few $100s a Sunday, that special Sunday, and that was it. So on one occasion, based on the assessment done, the recommendations sent to me, I would have approved that, ma'am.
I have one last question, Chairman. Thank you very much, PS. So in the Auditor General's report, the audit that is before us, it says it was requested by the current permanent secretary based on discrepancies which she found. So you would not be in a position to speak to what she found, but would you be in a position to say when you joined in 2015-16, if there were any concerns about the functioning of the fund, whether by way of criteria, process, disbursements, or any of the issues that you would have had presented to you in your familiarization at the beginning of your tenure in office there?
the criteria was there as I had established, so I don't know why it was said it was not there, because I found it there when I came. It was given to me. I reviewed it, and on that basis, I was able to operate in good faith. What I will say, though, is that they were building houses, and I found that the process for that was flawed, and in my tenure, I sought to correct that. I sought to ensure that all the persons who were recommended, and the recommendations came either through the NAB, some came through welfare, and some then came from persons who walked off the street and came and asked for help, and not always by a parliamentarian, because that was my experience in the time that I was there. But I found that the process was flawed in terms of how they went about building houses, and I determined that I would try to reorient the process, because they were building houses and they didn't have any planning permission, no planning permission. And I found that to be very disconcerting. They didn't know that first, because when they got there, the process had already started many years ago. And when I inquired about it, nobody could show me where the planning permission was. So during my tenure, the year when I was actually in charge of the year 2017 to 18, when 4 houses were actually built under my tenure, I made sure that I made contact with the chief surveyor, and in the case where persons didn't have plot plans, I got them from him. In the case where people were on lands and the landlords were amenable to them having a house built on the land, not a wall house, it would be a board house and stuff like that, I got their permission. I was then able to get the Ministry of Housing to help me to draw some very basic plans, which we submitted to the town planner. I met with the town planner, and I asked for him to expedite the planning process for me, which he did, and we were able to get planning permission for the houses that were built during my tenure, not what I came and found already being built that I didn't have any control over, but over the time that I had control. So we got that in place. What I also sought to do was to ensure that I put terms of reference in place so that we could get a consultant to oversee the projects, and they made sure that I revamped the terms of reference. All that is reflected on the files in the ministry. And then what we did, I met with persons in the ministry. It was myself, the deputy permanent secretary, Ms. Hamlin, the coordinator. It was also the senior accountant, one person from the Ministry of Housing and Land, one person from the Ministry of Transport and Works, and we sat down and we developed criteria to assess who should become the new project coordinator, because we had sent out requests for proposals. I think we only got a response from 4 persons. We set up an evaluation committee, and we did the review of the process to the point where we selected somebody to run that, because I understand that prior to my comment, that was not done. So I tried to put that process in place.
So you were saying that you had some concern that related to procedures such as getting planning permission, etc. Any concerns about any impropriety other than lack of observing proper procedure?
No, but I found it an impropriety that we did not have planning permission, because the Town Planning Act binds the Crown, and as an agent of the Crown, I had to ensure that I had that process in place.
Fair enough. The Crown should set the example.
Yes, sir.
Fair enough. I don't see any hands online asking for the floor. Minister Husbands, briefly.
Just for clarity,
Yeah.
and for clarity of the record,
Mhm.
I believe when you were speaking earlier, you would have indicated that there was only one house that you got UDC to build. Is it your,
I assisted UDC in buildings, ma'am.
sorry?
I assisted UDC. There was a very victim, and it was a welfare patient, and they wanted to rebuild the house quickly. They said they didn't have sufficient
Gotcha.
funds, and we helped out. I
Yeah.
assisted the UDC in building.
That's okay. That's not what I was referring to. I'm just trying to clarify, because people may not remember in earlier testimony that after that period, your unit took over doing your own building, not using UDC.
Yes, please.
Right. And that's where the 4 houses come from.
Yes, please.
Okay. Now, you said that you put a consultant in place. Who was that person?
Mr. Knight was put in place,
Okay.
Mr. Kenneth Knight.
And the process by which you were able to secure his services, how did you all go about doing that?
We were, as I said before, we sent out requests for people to tender to do the work, requests for proposals. We sent out requests for proposals. We received either 3 or 4. And we set up an evaluation committee where we evaluated the qualifications and experience of the persons who had submitted the proposals. And at the end of the process, we had selected someone who was supposed to be the project coordinator. But the person who ended up being the project coordinator is not the person who we selected. I said the person who ended up being the project coordinator was not the person who was selected during the evaluation process.
You want to further explain why that occurred?
Because it was instructed to do otherwise, ma'am.
Instructed by whom?
By the minister, it was instructed to do otherwise.
The person to whom it was assigned had put in a proposal?
Yes, they had.
Okay.
What was your review?
Were you finished, Minister, husband? Sorry? I didn't quite hear the information. We'll come back to it because I didn't quite hear what the exchange. Go
Well,
ahead.
I was following up on that. I think the question that was asked of PS was about the process of putting a consultant in place to manage the processes that we were just speaking about. The PS, I don't know if you want to repeat what you said, which was that there was a tender, an expression, request for proposals which was issued. Expressions that were invited to be submitted. There was an evaluation committee which reviewed the submissions, and a recommendation made for an appointment to be made on the basis of that committee. The person, whoever subsequently became the consultant, was not the person recommended by the evaluation committee, but the PS was instructed by the minister at the time to appoint someone different, and that person had submitted a proposal, which meant it had been evaluated, but they
Yes.
had not been selected by the committee. That's what we are following up on.
That's what you said?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Not as eloquently as minister, but that's what I say.
I'm summarizing you, PS. So I just want to be clear then, on the basis of what you have just said, what was your assessment of the performance of the person who then subsequently was contracted, and did they deliver on the stated objectives that were required of them?
Yes, they did.
Okay.
P.S. Before we go to Senator Drix, next, Poverty Eradication Fund. How does that relate to the poverty fund that operated or operates out of the Prime Minister's office? Is it the same? Is it additional? Is the current fund, the Prime Minister, the Poverty Alleviation Fund operating in the Prime Minister's office, successor to the Poverty Eradication Fund?
Not that I'm aware, minister.
Are the two related?
Not that I'm aware.
So they're separate funds?
That is my understanding.
And the Poverty Eradication Fund is still operating normally as it had in the past? There's no decrease of the levels of the funding or anything like that?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know?
No, please.
Okay. All right. Senator Drix?
Thank you, Chair. P.S. Phillips, when you first started your assessment of what happened in the ministry, you said that you did not disperse any monies to RDC, and there was a one payment through to UDC based on the case related to the fire victims. Prior to that, it seems as though there was some functioning relationship clearly between the fund and UDC and RDC. Why is it during your tenure that seemed to stop, for lack of a better word?
Yes, ma'am.
No, I'm asking the reason why. Why was the relationship, I don't want to say strained, but clearly you said that, you did not disperse any funds to the two entities. I'm just wondering why did you come to that state of affairs between yourselves and UDC and RDC?
Well, I was not the PS when the relationship was stopped. All I heard based on one or two conversations is that they were not delivering on time what was required of them.
So during your tenure, the only request that came to you from UDC was in relation to the $41,000 that's outlined in the Auditor General's report?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it is more than a case of the UDC and RDC not requesting funds through the fund, the Poverty Eradication Fund, and it's not necessarily that something alerted you to discrepancies happening at UDC or RDC that caused you to stop any kind of working relationship with them?
The relationship was stopped, ma'am, before I even got there.
Thank you, PS. Could you elaborate why that would have been so?
No, I cannot because it was not part of the administration at that time.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Phillips. Chair, back to you.
Minister Husband. All right, Minister Cummings.
Chair, I have a question. It's however not for PS Phillips. It is for the Auditor General. Is the Auditor General on the
Mr.
call?
Trotman, are you still on?
Yes, Chair, I'm still here.
Auditor General, I have a query. It has actually troubled me throughout this entire process. This report captures the period 2007 through 2019. And a lot of the statements that are made and a lot of the issues that are raised do not have a corresponding time period, which puts the committee in a very challenging position to ask witnesses who are appearing before them queries that may or may not fall within their tenure. Is there a reason why the report is so sweeping in the way in which it is written that it does not define time periods based on the recommendations and findings you have outlined in the paper?
Not really. There's an issue here though. We have basically two reports: a detailed report that we normally issue to the ministry, and then a kind of summary of that report that we have in the Auditor General's report, which would, for instance, not include names of entities and that type of stuff. I'm not too sure if that will help you. So if for instance, if the committee had wanted, let's say that we were talking about assistance that we consider that were not in sync with the mandate, we have the information that we could have given the committee if it wanted in terms of all the entities that we thought that would have had some assistance that didn't quite fit in.
Chairman, I'm not sure that helps me, to be quite frank.
It would have all the years in terms of this happened in 2011, 2010, whatever.
So I think, Chairman, just as a matter of course, we raised earlier in our conversation that these proceedings of the committee are being live streamed to the country. We live in a small society, and at times where even the appearance of inappropriate management of government resources is something that everyone sees simultaneous to the presentation, I think it's important for us to make sure that we are as careful as we possibly can be in the crafting of documents which then go into the public record and are then streamed live, because a period as long as 2007 to 2019 and some of the findings that are here that are not qualified by time and agency cast aspersions, in some instances unfairly so, on individuals who are then being presented, and it makes the work of the committee slightly difficult because we're asking questions to witnesses that don't really correspond with the time period that they're there. So it is important for the additional information made reference to by the Auditor General to be presented simultaneous to the overall umbrella report, that give us the opportunity to mine a little further into the actual reports. Otherwise, Chair, I feel as though we're doing ourselves a bit of a disservice, and we're certainly doing our witnesses even more of a disservice in the public eye.
Thank you for that comment, and I agree with that. And that has arisen with respect, especially to this particular 2020 report. As I observed, I didn't think we had that kind of an issue with the 2018. Look at the 2018 report. But I think that point is being made, and we'll have to see how we can better handle the matter going forward in terms of information which the committee receives and which is related to the Auditor General's report, while at the same time bearing in mind that these hearings do go live now to the public. And I respect also the position of the Auditor General that you have to be careful as to what information is provided. But I think I hear Mr. Trotman saying it's available if you want to have it. And I think the committee, as Minister Cummins is suggesting, should have the benefit of that. And then let's use our prudent discretion to determine what we allow for public consumption. So I think that that can help to improve the situation. Did you have a further question, Minister?
I just want to add a comment to what you're saying, that therefore we would appreciate a breakdown of the cases. There were 300 and something cases that were assessed, 122 that were not. I think we'd like to know the time frames for that, as well as the ones that did not have the ministerial or the PS approval. I had just two small questions to complete what I was asking. Who was the minister at the time when you were PS?
Minister Blackett. Minister Blackett.
Minister Blackett. And who was the PS before you?
I think it was Ernesta
Driggs?
Driggs. Yes.
Okay. And who is the accounts person that would have signed off on the dispersals during your time?
That would be Mr. Horace Williams.
Mr.
Horace Williams? You mean the person in charge of the account section?
Yes.
Yes. Mr. Horace Williams.
Williams, okay. Okay, thank you very much.
I don't see any further hands. Any further word, Mr. Trotman? Anything from you, from your office?
Yeah, Chair, I'd just like to close here with this. When we were conducting this audit, we had some challenges in getting relevant critical information from the ministry, even from some of the same personnel who would have given evidence. The first thing we wanted was the origins of the fund, basically. Was there cabinet paper? Who came up with the criteria? And we have not gotten that to know, actually. Some of the issues that would be mentioned in terms of, let's say we're talking about things not seen. We were not suggesting that they were not there. We didn't see them. We asked for them, but we were not given the relevant information. Some of the issues that relate to, let's say, assistance to agencies that were not necessarily in sync with the criteria. What we were suggesting is that if we had a clearly documented criteria, I'm not too sure, I've never seen the one that Ms. Phillips mentioned. It wasn't presented to us. So we were saying, look, if you have a poverty alleviation fund, should it be involved in this providing assistance to Mom This One's for You, Balance Show, mortgage arrears, assistance with publication of books and so on. So we had our concerns as it relates to those, because I didn't have a criteria to assess if these would fit into that criteria. And some of these things would have been over many years, 2011, 2012, so, and that kind of stuff. To summarize that, the main challenge that we had in terms of this audit was that we could not get that initial information to establish the criteria. In some cases, the whole issue of the follow-up was lacking. Monies were given, even in terms of the housing. We might look at the years of which it was being given. Let's say what Ms. Phillips would have just described. There was only one disbursement within her period, which we will acknowledge as well, and it's in the report, that be 41,000. But our concern wasn't necessarily if there was a disbursement within the period that Ms. Phillips had. Our concern was about all the other disbursements that I had, that there wasn't any follow-up to see if the houses were completed. That was our concern. So our concern had a issue in terms of follow-up, regardless of if you were already PS at that time or no. We are saying that they had these monies that were dispersed, whatever millions or whatever it was, and that there was no follow-up by the ministry or the poverty fund to ensure that the things were actually done. So those were some of the key issues that we had in terms of this audit. I do take Ms. Minister Cummins' point into contention, but generally speaking, though, we don't normally publish the names of entities and so on in the report, in this particular report. But we don't have a problem in improving whatever we do. So if the committee wants that context, I don't have a problem with it at all. And we will ensure that going forward, the context is there. Perhaps the context might be there in the detailed report, but we'll ensure that the context is there for these reports. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Trotman. Ms. Phillips, my final question, I don't know if anybody else has any other. What would be your recommendation for the improvement of the operation of this fund, if any, going forward?
The guidelines are there. If you need to go back and review them to bring them up to date to 21st century, certainly, because in relation to an assessment of poverty, I realize that the $7,000 per annum is still not consistent to the current reality. The real value of money deteriorates every year. So to me, an assessment will have to be done again to ensure that we actually are more on point in relation to what is happening in today's context. I firmly believe that the work that was done in relation to the housing program was good work. I was able to witness actually going to houses that were completed under my tenure and see the expressions of persons and the gratitude that was there. I personally think that it was something that should be continued, but that's now out of my purview to be properly managed, ensure that a system is in place in terms of the management and oversight. And if there is need for further documentation, have the documentation. But I know for a fact that we visited the houses at different stages of construction, and we went back when the houses were handed over. I think it is a good policy, Minister, but I'm not sure whether it really belongs under the Ministry of People Empowerment and Elder Cares. It might be better placed in another ministry which has better resources and experience to deal with the matter.
Any more, any suggestions, recommendations, more so relative to internal operations of it?
Sir, when I left, I found a field investigator who worked very hard to do a job, and a coordinator who provided assistance. The fact that there's so many more people in Barbados Poor, to me, there's a need for more staff to actually get out there and be able to do the assessments and turn around quicker, because the turnaround time was much less because it was only one person on the ground, and to me that hindered us from reaching the people as quickly as we wanted to reach them.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the things that came out in this hearing from others before you, and it's in the report, the length of time between a request for assistance, recommendation, the assistance be given, provision of allocation for the assistance, and then it takes years, decade, more, before a project is, so I thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody else before we release Ms. Phillips? All right, I don't see anybody that's asking for the floor. Ms. Phillips, let me thank you, please, for coming to share with us and sharing with us as forthrightly as you have.
Thank you, sir.
And let me wish you well.
Thank you.
And I'm told there are refreshments downstairs that you are welcome.
We're good, sir.
And your husband,
We're good, sir.
and Miss Jordan. And we will feel offended if you don't sup with us.
Can I go now, sir?
Yeah, you can. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, following on from what Minister Cummings was intimating, more than intimating. Yeah, well, I hope they know that. Following on from what Minister Cummings was indicating, you don't get a sense that you've received some of the answers that you need to have in relation to this matter because of the timelines and the little disparity that exists between functionaries at a certain time and the queries raised in the Auditor General's report. I still think we wanted to get a DPS, Deputy Permanent